My name is Michelle Brome. Living in a big city, I have a pretty busy life. Going to school, being with friends, and dealing with parents. But sometimes I think of other people in other places. I watch the news. The politics are so confusing. Through my friends, I found out about a really special peace tour coming to Montreal and other Canadian cities. 35 people my own age from war-torn countries would talk about life at home. They were going to be with us for 2 weeks. The event was organized by community groups and school boards with help from the government. Being so caught up with life here, I never really had to deal with the realities of war. So it was quite curious to meet with people my own age who had actually lived through war.
Even though we hear all this stuff on the news, it's always on news. I think basically everything that they said we do know, but the fact that they've been through it all is what makes it, more real.
In Belfast, where I live, we have patrols every 5 minutes of the day coming round, just harassing people, stopping you in the street, asking you where you're going, where you're coming from, your age.
They killed one of my classmates, and then a month later they killed a family of another friend.
There's a mass genocide occurring in East Timor at the moment. 200,000 people have been killed in East Timor. It's about a third of the population, and they executed cold-bloodedly in front of their families some men who were thought of as being belonging to the resistance movement, the guerrillas, that if they're caught, they take them to in front of the families and they behead them. They had their teeth removed one by one, and they submerged them underwater for long periods of times, and they ask them questions, and if they don't answer or refuse to answer, they submerge them underwater again.
The way South Africa keeps its occupation in our country is through security forces, and what they do is they take young men, particularly white men from age 17 upwards, and they conscript them for 2 years.
Here were kids from countries that I never heard of before, like East Timor or Namibia. Yvette told us that South Africa is controlling Namibia. The blacks form 90% of the population, and the whites only form 10%, but they're in control. Yvette gave me some pictures to remember her by. One of them is of her high school. In front of the school is the flag of South Africa, along with the flag of her own country. It is here that they teach young white Namibians to mix with other whites only. I didn't realize a white person like Yvette could be so strongly against apartheid. She's trying to get her friends to join her in overthrowing the unjust policies of her government.
And what's happened as a result of that, many friends of mine have had to go, school friends have had to go this year into the army, have had to go and become fighting machines. And for me, the person who's my best friend, well, you would say boyfriend, we've had to, because we are on different ends of the poles, he's now pro-government. He's been so brainwashed that he's all for the government. He's a military policeman. Because where he is and because where I am, we've had a total disagreement. We've had to stop seeing one another because it's a danger for both of us.
It is still dangerous for whites and blacks to meet in Namibia. But in Zimbabwe, this is no longer the case. One of the tour participants told me that here, the blacks finally won their freedom in 1980. All the same, the past is hard to forget.
One time, they shot a young man in front of me. Just shot him right at 2 bullets. And many young people became victims of the situation. They were arrested with no trial. So many took the risk of going out of the country. maybe crossing rivers. Some were shot trying to run away of the country.
You said your friends and yourself also were harassed by the police and the soldiers. What exactly would the soldiers use as provocation to harass you? Like, were you just for any reason?
There were no reasons of that, but they could just, if you were just young and you were suspected, you could be, anything could be done to you, and you were forced to do something which you don't want to do. There are no reasons which you were given. You see, they were dictating you. Do whatever you want. If it tells you lick my shoe, you lick it. See, just because maybe you are black, you see, so you do it.
In your country, now that the government has changed hands from the whites to the blacks, do you find that the racism has switched hands now that the blacks are in power? Do they consider the whites inferior?
Blacks don't consider the whites inferior. Actually, there is this, which is mentally, some blacks were affected, that they cannot forget that, since they lived in oppression for so many years, sometimes, they are afraid, you see, they inferiorize themselves. But in the other end, there are many more people who are very free now. Though we gained our independence in Zimbabwe, we are now 5 years of independence. I don't think there is that peace which is needed.
There isn't that peace that is needed. After listening to Justice, I understand that peace is not just the absence of war. Now that the blacks have gained their political freedom, they are trying to assure economic opportunities as well.
I live in Ireland, and for me it's my country, and I would always want to stay in Belfast. I would like to see it become a united Ireland, but the way things look, I don't think it will be. For a while, like.
Kieran, a Catholic, said that as long as he can remember, the Protestants have forced Northern Ireland to be part of the United Kingdom. However, the Catholics feel that they would have greater opportunities if all of Ireland were united as one. This would assure more jobs for families such as Kieran's.
I come from a family of 9. It's 7 brothers and 1 sister. And out of my 7 brothers, I've 1 working. My mother and father are also unemployed. Most people are unemployed in Ballymurphy. There's 85% unemployment, and I think that's because of discrimination in big factories. There was a whole kick-up about it not so long ago because there was an awful lot of Protestants and very few Catholic people working in it, and I think now maybe they're taking in a few, but not very many.
I asked Kieran how he felt about the violence in his country.
Well, I haven't known anything different than violence. I haven't really known peace. It's all been violence to me. Your family's house is raided at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, not so often now, but a few years ago it was done once a week. And I mean, your brothers be arrested and just held with no charge. Well, in 1971 he was arrested under internment. It was, you were imprisoned without a trial or without a charge, and he was arrested when he was 17, and he was tortured. They put his head in water, and just as, so to speak, he was about to die, they revived him again to try and get some information.
The tour participants spent a weekend in the country together to do what young people like to do, have fun. They also talked about ways to achieve peace and make lasting friends. Sure, there were arguments, chaos, and confusion, but one thing was evident. Under no circumstances was it fair for ordinary people in any country to suffer the consequences of those who abuse power. Some tour participants are going back home. For others, Canada has become home. 2 are refugees from Central America, where civil wars are aggravated by the intervention of foreign governments. Fito tried to lead a normal school life in Guatemala, but he gradually became involved, along with his family, in the popular resistance movement against the government in power. Guatemala is overrun by the military.
They were always following us everywhere we went. Even my sister and me, we were just 13 and 12 years old. And my uncle, he was dead and tortured. And they tortured him in one of the worst forms you can imagine. It was just incredible. Nobody couldn't recognize him because it was not him. They take out his hair and his teeth and his fingernails, and just to mention some of the tortures they made to him.
And everything began for me in 1979, when the civil war started in El Salvador. By the middle of the 1979, the student movement started to protest against the government. So by that time, we were like organized in my school, but I was elected as class officer with 5 other students. So we started to make a new activity like parties, raffles to raise money.
As a student, it is hard for me to identify with Yamila's life and with the government's opposition to her student activities. There's a civil war right now in El Salvador, and it has brought death squads to her door.
They start really to threaten my friends and me. There was always a man, like in the corner, and in the next corner there was another one, and so on. And so when I was walking to school, they were always behind me, and if I tried to look back, they will kill me. They fly over my house in a helicopter, shining spotlights over my house, and then one night they knocked my door, and so we didn't open the door that night because it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and we knew if they wanted to kill us, they just blow the door and came in and just kill us, and that's it. But they didn't. What they did was they put 2 bodies in front of my house, one of my friends, and they just leave them there.
The psychological torture they do to people they capture and to my family. And they start calling my phone to my house and trying to make problems inside my house, to create problems inside my house, by telling my mom that my dad has another woman who was, and trying to do things like that. So in other words, they were trying to send us away from Guatemala, or because they didn't want us to be there.
Why did they kill them? I mean, if they want to kill me, why just, really, it's not a problem for them to kill me. They just come in and kill me, and that's it. But they don't need to kill my friends or threaten my friends or kill my family, because they killed 2, my father's brother and my cousin. So they didn't need to do that. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was crying and my whole body was shaking because of the fear. It was too much. I mean, if I tried to like look out the window, they were in front of my house watching all the time.
Strange place to put a.
It's gotta be lower. Wait.
Have my feet, okay?
It's 5 years now that I'm living in the exile as a refugee, and I can't go back to my country. It's really hard for the rest of the world to know what's happening, what's going on in countries like Guatemala, where I live.
I was, like asking myself, what am I gonna do here? Like it was like being in something that I was not familiar with. So I had so many problems. Yet, to get used to, I'm still having problems, but
I asked Yamila how she got along with her school friends.
well, most of them, like my classmates in my English class are from Vietnam, so I don't have problem with them. And the other, I don't, just keep them, like just say hi and everything, but nothing more. My friends are just Salvadorians.
A usted, a quien nadie le cantó, se escondieron los poetas para usted, porque su nombre de bala y guerra gritó con furia la libertad y arrancó con sangre y fuego.
What do you think about having to go back home after you know what it's like in a free country?
I live in Australia at the moment, so there's no danger for me. Whereas if I were to go back to East Timor, which I can't, then most certainly I'd be in danger. But Yvette, who's going back to Namibia, she could probably tell you more about that.
Actually, being on the tour and the things I've said have put me into a lot more danger. So I would say it's not really the danger before I came. I would say there's a greater danger now going back. I know so many people who are sitting in prisons, in jails, or I hope so. I don't know where they are, if they're still alive. And I'm aware that these type of conditions can happen when I go back too.
This question's directed to a guy from Mexico. Oh, Guatemala, sorry. Sorry about that. You said there's a lot of fighting in your country, and people are being killed everywhere. Would you ever fight back against the opposing team who are killing them?
If we don't fight against the other guys, would you fight back?
Yeah, the people, the students and the poor people, all they are organized and they are fighting back. That's what I said. In my country, there's a war, a civil war, and that means that the poor people is fighting against the oppression, and that is the most of the people against the minority of the people.
Do you happen to have the same facilities as we do, like libraries and public stores and stuff like that?
In my case, in Guatemala, the educational system is the worst in Latin America. That means that over 75, between 75 and 80% of the population is illiterate. And that means that the schools and the libraries and all those facilities that you all have here are only for the rich people in my country. The most of the people don't have any facilities. Children have to work instead of studying.
You said that you were forced out of your country. When the war is over, do you think are you allowed to go back? And if you are, will you?
I'm sure that I'm going back someday, and I am sure that I'm going back because I see you, and I know that you are understanding and you are thinking now about our problems, and I'm sure because you are gonna try to do some change, and we are trying to do some change, and the people is fighting against oppression, so that makes me feel sure that someday I will be back. Yes.
to ask you some questions. I mean, you've been asking us a lot, and that is when you look at you've heard today a lot of testimonies of particularly of war situations. Do you think that in countries war is inevitable, because of what people are like?
If you're born into like a country where there is a war, you're gonna grow up to think the same way that the people do. Like you're gonna grow up to be able to fight in a war, and it'll just go on and on.
I think that these days people like being powerful and they have to fight to get the power.
When one of the people was saying that they torture people so much, like that they do things that are unthinkable, and I can't see how one person can have so much hatred for all of the other people that they'd want to do things so bad as like beheading them or something.
I was thinking how lucky I am, and when I heard what people were saying, I thought, all I'm worrying about is will I get honors the next term or something like that, and other people are wondering, is my family going to be all right and everything. So it was kind of scary.
I was wishing that I could do something to help the situation, just make it all go away, and just make world hunger and starvation and nuclear war just all go away.
By getting to know people on the tour, I've come to care a lot, and I've begun to question things that bother me. Like, why do world leaders resort to the military and violence? Why is it so hard to see that war does not solve problems, but it creates them? I'd like to find out how my own country is involved. It is my future world that's at stake. Next time I read the headlines, I'll remember the faces of Yvette, Justice, Kieran, Yamila, and Fito.
When you live in a country like Guatemala, where there's a lot of injustice, you have to sing to the peace, to the life, and to the hope. Because if there's a person who doesn't have hope or life, it's like a death. And this song is dedicated to life.
Debo cantarle a la vida que se fue. Debo cantarle a la vida que tendré, hasta que al fin de un largo viaje me detengo a pensar que en la vida hay que alcanzar ese final que todos quieren y es la verdad. Debo cantarle a la vida que se fue. Debo cantarle a la vida que tendré. Por eso ahora digo que la vida es el amor, y es ese amor de pueblo que a mí me hace cambiar. Debo cantarle a la vida que se fue. Debo cantarle a la vida que tendré. Por eso ahora digo que la vida es el amor, y es ese amor de pueblo que nos hace cambiar para